that the ultimate, let's say in terms of human relationships, like you can see that the ultimate purpose is to love one another and to give yourselves for others. And then when you disorder that, then you start to treat others like tools to get you stuff, right? Tools to get you what you want, whether it's money, whether it's pleasure, whatever it is. And so you can perceive it if you're careful. You can perceive it in yourself when that gets out of whack, which is all the time. Like not it gets out of whack all the time, but at least if you know that it's like, okay, if it's not serving this higher good, which is love, if it's not serving this higher good, which is unity and with Christ, then ultimately it's a danger. It's in a dangerous space, and it can lead me really into dark places.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Orthodox Logos. My name is Ian Silver, and I'm joined with, not conjoined with, as I've said many times, my co-host Nathaniel Harmon.
Joined by, not joined with.
Yeah, joined by, conjoined with. And we're here with Jonathan Pageau, the host of the Symbolic World, icon carver, iconographer. Don't need too much of an introduction, and if people haven't seen your work, we'll make sure to link it below. But this has been something that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. So we really appreciate your time, and thanks for being here.
No, it's a pleasure. It's always good to go on Orthodox podcast, because I talk to a lot of secular people, but I try to make sure that I also prioritize some Orthodox content.
Perfect. Well, if you don't mind, we'll start with a prayer as we try to. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory to thee, our God. Glory to thee, heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fill us all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life. Come and abide in us and cleanse us from every stain and save our souls, O gracious Lord. Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, have mercy on us. Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, have mercy on us. Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, have mercy on us. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. All right. We try to start prayerfully. I think it's important.
Yeah, good stuff.
All right, I have.
It's weird to pray virtually, but that's okay. We had to do it during COVID a little bit, so
confession virtually is weird too.
Yeah, we did that on the phone for a while. Man, that was horrible. It was so bad. It's like I'm just so happy that's over.
Yeah.
2020 was awful. I was in my room by myself watching a service happen 140 miles away. Like, this will never happen again. This is just, words can't express how wrong this is.
Yeah, what we decided to do kind of on the sly is we said, okay, we need to learn to do reader services, because this is not maybe the last time something like this is going to happen. So we need to learn to be able to do the liturgy as a reader service, and maybe start to learn to do matins and stuff. And so we kind of started, but then as soon as it's over, you get lazy again, and it's like, oh man, we're so lazy, so spiritual lazy. It's frustrating.
Okay, well, I had two questions. Nathan doesn't know about these. They're very brief. They're kind of just, I guess you could call them icebreakers or whatever. Okay, so I want to know both of yours, specifically, Jonathan, your favorite icon and why. If you could pick one icon, why would it be your favorite?
I mean, to me, it's pretty simple. It's just the icon of Christ. That's really my favorite icon, because I think that it contains all the icons in it. In its very simplicity, just the way of Christ blessing and holding the book, and just the basic elements seem to really contain all the cosmos inside. I've actually tried to do talks where I try to unfold that, where I'm like, this really, just the icon of Christ contains the Deicist, contains the Last Judgment, contains all these images. And so it really is. I always tell people, if you can't afford, it's better to get a nice, beautiful painted icon of Christ than to get a bunch of like paper icons like that just fill your wall with. So
yeah. So if there was one icon, if there was only one icon around, that would be your choice.
That would be the one. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that makes sense. I don't think of it in that way, and I should. Mine's going to be the ladder of divine ascent. I think there's just something sobering about that. I've said it before, and especially like if you look at the way the triangle is, or the ladder, it's created two triangles, one representing the upper and one representing the lower, which is something that you talk about. And I just think it's a great reminder that even, monks still fall, and that none of us are safe. So I think that's my favorite icon. Nathan?
You guys have given very erudite explanations and had good choices, so I'm going to feel very trite now. But I would have to go with the icon of the Mystical Supper. That was actually the first icon that I bought because of an experience I had right before I became an inquirer into Orthodoxy that fully convinced me that, because icons were kind of a hang up for me in my conversion. But I had a very curious and disconcerting mystical experience with that icon, and I've loved it ever since. And if I could only have one, that would be the one.
Yeah. Okay. Second question, and then we'll jump into the topic. Your favorite food during a fast? I just got to know. I know Nathan eats like he's always fasting, so.
No, I don't.
I mean, I'm gonna be lazy again. It's just the protein I can get. It's like eating shrimp during a fast. That's it. Like that's the protein. That's the favorite food right there.
Guess what? I don't eat any seafood or shrimp, so
good call. You can do that if you can succeed.
Mine's gonna be, I started making this soup recently that's like vegetable broth, nutritional yeast, and a bunch of vegetables, and it's hearty. It makes you feel like you're not fasting, which I know is kind of not good, but
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But
during Lent, at some point, it's like, man.
I know. And there's certain days where there's fish allowed and then shrimp's always allowed. And I'm just sitting there eating Del Taco bean burritos, So Nathan?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. I like all of the genetic variation that has come out of cabbage. Like the broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all this stuff. I'll saute that up, and that is pretty much my go-to. I just think it has I don't know, it's great. Cabbage goes with everything.
Yeah, me and Nate work together. We also work together outside of doing this, and he shows up eating Brussels sprouts at 7:30 in the morning, and I was like, "This is going to be a fun day."
Yeah,
All right, Nate. Well, if you want to do the intro, oh, actually, real quick, Jonathan, I had a question. Me and Nathan found this. Let's see if it'll focus.
Yeah.
So it's St. Basil. We found it at a used bookstore for $15.
Nice.
We can't decipher what it's supposed to be. It has like a lid. There was like a place for a lid.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
For sure, it seems to have contained something.
We were trying to think maybe relics or a prayer list.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think like you're saying, I don't think I've seen is it written in Greek?
Yeah, it's St. Basil.
But it's not Russian, is the question.
No, it says well, no.
Yeah. It looks like it's written. It looks like it's written. Yeah, it's written in Greek for sure. The focus goes in and out. And it's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
How big is it? Like an inch maybe? An inch and a half?
Yeah. Brass and silver.
Yeah, brass and silver.
And I can't tell what the little dangly things are. Of course, it's not going to focus.
Yeah, no, it's like they're definitely. I don't know. It's maybe for sure. It seems to have contained something, but I would be surprised that it would be relics because it's not. It doesn't seem like oppression in it. To have relics of Saint Basil, for goodness sake, like you wouldn't want to carry in that little like brass thing. Right. So maybe something else, like something. I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
Well, it was next to tarot cards and crystals at a used bookstore, so I was not going to let it sit there any longer. It saved me in a weird way.
It saved me. That's right. It called me to get it out of there.
And me and Nathan, he was like, "So who's going to buy it?" I was like, me."
Or $15 is definitely worth more than that. Yeah. That's for sure.
Well, every time we go to used bookstores, he always gets the good things. We're in a competition, and I have lost every single time. Are we going to jump into the question?
All right, let's go.
All righty. So rehashing what we did without the recording, this line of questioning was, prompted by the video that you did with Brett Weinstein a few months back, Jonathan, and it's regarding the issue of teleology and evolution and the way that evolutionists and science, even modern scientists, talk about it. And it seems to stem from this idea of the dethroning of theology from the queen of the sciences. But in that conversation with Brett, he always talks about, or he consistently talked about genes as having a will or a desire, or some sort of sense of time, some sort of sense of agency. And as far as we know, genes, that's not what genes are. You and I are not made up of like this weird kind of polyp colony of a bunch of random genetic consciousness or consciousnesses, I guess, that what we do, as far as we know. And it wouldn't even make sense if that was the case, that if, you know, an epithelial cell in your skin gets to tell your heart what to do. That's just weird. But they also talk about the idea that evolution itself has a sort of guiding consciousness, which again, from a materialist point of view, makes zero sense. And
yeah, well, in Brett's case, it's even worse than that. In Brett's case, it's been worse than that because on the one hand, he says something like, "This is what evolution wants,"
yeah,
and then he says something even crazier. That was crazy enough. Then he says something even crazier, which is that, but now we have to move away from what evolution wants, and it's like, what? So evolution has a teleology, and I'm going to declare a new teleology that to liberate us from the teleology of evolution. But I'm not going to tell you where that teleology comes from. It's just going to be this like amorphous thing that we all recognize to be better. And it's so bad. It's really bad. I'm sorry.
Can we give a definition, for people who don't know what teleology is? Just like a brief.
It just means that there's a reason for something, right? So whatever a process has a reason, it has a purpose, a direction, so something toward which it's aiming. And the idea is that modern evolutionary thinking says that there is no teleology, right? Things don't have purposes ultimately. And so, you know, your eye doesn't have the purpose to see. It doesn't have there's not a reason for seeing that your eye exists. Your eye exists through a random process of mutations and selection that have brought about this phenomena that we can now kind of add on top of that a perception of what we think is meaning, but ultimately that meaning isn't there. But what happens is the evolutionists can't avoid it. They always talk as if there was meaning, because that's actually how humans interact with the world. And so they always end up in this weird situation. Just listen to an evolutionist for 5 minutes. That they can say there's no teleology, and then listen, and you'll see the teleology appears within 2 sentences of what they just said. It's inevitable, because that's actually, you can't look at the world without teleology. Humans, meaning, the very identities of things are teleological, because we're always identifying whether or not the example we're looking at is good or not. So it's like you're always questioning, like, is this a proper example of what it is I'm identifying? And so the good is implied in all identities. You can't avoid it. It's like and it's something that someone like Brett just can't see. He has a blind spot. I don't know what to say.
I had the same reaction you did when he got to the point where he was saying, we have to rebel against the genes. Like, the sentence is coherent, but the ideas behind it are so utterly chaotic that can't be a thing. If genes are conscious and if evolution is guiding everything, there is no possibility of rebellion. That's even more futile than Lucifer rebelling against God.
It's like it's like you're saying you're made out of this. This is what you're made of. And now whoever that is, that's not made out of this, is going to rebel against this. Because if you're only made of this, there is no you to rebel against this. Like, where's this you that isn't made of this that can rebel against it? It's like, woo, it's weird. It's like, it's loopy in terms of its logic.
It's a kind of panentheism. It's been very interesting to me to just kind of observe I don't even want to call it paganism, because paganism is a little too refined for what modern science is becoming. But it's like very shamanistic now, where, I mean, hell, the idea of talking about genes as having a desire is a very shamanistic kind of thing. You throw the knuckle bones to see what the genes want you to do, but the genes wanted you to do that. So
So
I mean,
you rebel against them. But I do think that what we're seeing in Brett, and it's like he might be annoyed that I say this, but what I think we're seeing in Brett is the inevitability of God. Like that if you analyze the discourse, you realize that what he's really saying is that there's a transcendent good. Okay, let's say that first. Like, okay, maybe we won't say God right away. Say that later. It's like there's a transcendent good that is direct, that is higher than the material causes, and that transcendent good is calling the material causes out of their parasitic nature, out of their fallen nature. That's what we'd say as Christians. And it's like, yeah, I'm fine with that. But it's like if you're saying it, but you can't see the move you're making, then that's the frustration. But what I hope in these discussions, honestly, is that ultimately the people listening will see it. And like people that are right on the cusp and are thinking, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about this, and they're like, dude, this makes no sense. You can't, the propositions he's making they're not coherent.
What is the goal of that kind of discussion, do you think? I mean, when Brett's talking about rebelling against the genes or trying to, shift the inevitable flow of evolution towards something that, he as an enlightened 21st century biologist happens to think is the best course. Like, what is the purpose of that? What is he shooting for? I don't understand why an evolutionist would be speaking in such a, I mean, to be honest, with such a Christian lens, even though
well, that's what's going on. I mean, that's what's happening. It's like I believe that the religious is inevitable. I believe that the impetus towards religion is something that we're made that way. And so that's why it's a universal. That's why there's religion all over the place, in every culture, in every time. And so I think that that's what we're seeing. Like he's just manifesting that in a very awkward and displaced way. And so he's saying something like, it's the end of the world, folks. You need to repent. That's what he's saying. But he's just saying it in like, the place in which he's standing can't hold what he's trying to say. And so it ends up being contradictory and strange.
Yeah, I was this way prior to Orthodoxy. I mean, I came from like a pagan New Age occult. I lived in Sedona. I mean, I'm not far from Sedona right now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that area.
No, I don't know what that is.
It is the New Age Mecca of the world.
Okay.
I mean, you go to Whole Foods and you find someone who can read your palms. You go to a grocery store and it's like everybody is a light worker. But it's bad. I had this notion of like the universe. That's what I would always call it. Like I knew there was a reason for everything, but I would always refer to it as the universe.
The universe. Yeah, I hear people do that all the time. I ask the universe, and it's beautiful because it's like, I know you want to say God, my friend, because nobody talks to the universe. We talk to people. You know that, right? Like you don't talk to trees. You don't talk to a cardboard box.
Well, people in Sedona do.
Yeah, they talk to cardboard boxes.
Oh, dude,
like the human, language is a human thing. It's a human a connection. And so, if we let's say understand that the best way to represent God is as a person, let's say, even though we also understand, let's say something like that's the way God has revealed himself to us, but we also know that he is beyond that definition, but we know that he reveals to us as a person, and that's why we're made in the image of God. And so, but the universe is like, okay, so
what?
Who are you talking to? Like the universe is answering you. So I guess the universe is, it's like the body of God, I guess, the way maybe they think of it. They don't want the transcendent aspect. They just want all of creation. It's like, I'm talking to all of creation, basically.
Yeah, they're obsessed with the creation and not the creator.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I guess it does.
Well, it makes sense, at least. It makes sense why they would say that. It doesn't make sense ultimately, but it makes sense at why they would use those words. My wife is very patient with that. I get really impatient. She does this thing in her mind where she's like, she does a trick in her mind when she hears someone say that. Like I ask the universe, she's like, okay, what you're really saying is you wish you could say you talk to God, but you're not going to say that. So I'm going to just act as if that's what you said. And then we'll continue the conversation. Because me, it was just like, right. It's like if someone says that to me, it's like it's shut off. Well, no, no, I could probably get over it. I talk to way weirder people online sometimes where it's like, I talked to this guy the other, like just yesterday. What is his name? Marcus Aubrey. He's like a
Aubrey Marcus.
Aubrey Marcus.
No way. So that is like a big idol in the New Age community.
So it was interesting because it was one of those things where I'm like talking and I'm trying to explain certain things. Then he would say something which was like, so then what do you do? Like, do you stop the conversation because he said something so crazy that you don't know how to deal with it?
Is this going to come out?
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, imagine it's going to come out in the next.
He's really heavy into like ayahuasca and plant medicine, which is stuff.
Yeah, that was a tough discussion because at some point he got to brought that in, and I'm like, well, kept saying something like, well, I'm not the psychedelics guy.
Yeah,
but don't you think that? Like, it's like I also don't want to just slam the conversation shut. It's tough. It's tough having these discussions sometimes.
It's also weird when you are having that kind of conversation and somebody does say, oh yes, so all these psychedelics, and I talk to all these different things when I'm tripping. And it's like, well, so you're talking to demons, you know that, right? That's also the same kind of thing for them. It's really hard to go forward with a conversation like that
once you said something like that. But I would just tried to just suggest, for example, the notion of the clockwork elves and the relationship between technology and these types of beings that they encounter on psychedelics. But it was kind of those, it's like yeah, you're just kind of poking in, but you want to be careful not to shut it down. But that happens a lot in conversations. With Brett Weinstein, it was the same. Like he says something and you're just like, oh, do I just let it go? I have to let it go. Because if I stop it, it's not. So then you let a bunch of things go. And then you're like, I know there's someone online, some Orthodox guy is going to be like, why didn't you call him out on this? Why didn't you call him out on that? I'm like, well, you have to find the right place to speak, for it to be productive. It's tough.
That's how people are with like you and Jordan Peterson, huh? They're like, why don't you just tell him to become Orthodox? It's like, because that's God's work.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, it's like, leave it up to God. I'll just do what I can,
I mean, I'll definitely say that I really appreciated the way you held that discussion with Brett, because as someone who likes to argue and is more than willing to just blow up every single wall that I find in somebody else's argument or do my damnedest, it was really nice to see an interaction where the entire worldview of the interlocutor was being teased out and kind of displayed. That's far more effective, rhetorically speaking, I think, than winning in the typical sophist sense.
Yeah, just winning. Well, I don't like debates. That's why I usually don't do debates. People ask me to get in debates all the time, and I'm like, I mean, I know some people that are really good at it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with debates. It's like the church fathers had debates. It's not like there's something evil about it, but I don't think it's for everybody. And for sure, I feel like my strength has rather been to try to surprise people or to surprise them with an insight that they hadn't thought about, that kind of approach where, like you said, you listen, and then you kind of just say something to try to get that surprise. And sometimes it doesn't work. Some of the secular discussion that I've had, you can just see me getting frustrated. Brett wasn't as bad as others. Like there's that guy, Rationality Rules or whatever. I was just getting frustrated because I was like, you don't even understand the subject of what I'm talking about. Like you actually don't know what and then there's this condescending tone at the same time, man. It's tough.
I like that you said, the church fathers did it. That's what I keep reminding myself. The church fathers did it.
Well, the fathers did.
It's not for me.
Some of the fathers were exactly. It's not for me. It's like people. There's that joke. Well, it's not a joke. It's probably true. The idea of St. John Chrysostom, walking through the market and hearing people talking about, the council and talking about and being like, what are they doing? This is not for you people. Like this is very, very high. Let the professionals deal with this, and you guys go about your business. But this is the online space though, that it's definitely has created that that
Yeah,
space.
I was kind of going that way for a little bit, and then I had to take like a month or so offline and talk to my spiritual father and kind of sober myself up in a spiritual sense. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to come on here and talk to people like you, or we're planning on having like a lot of clergy on
Mm.
and sticking to that, because it's like I'm not here to tell you what to do because I can't even do what I tell myself to do.
Yeah, well, it is difficult, the online space. I would say most of the time. There are exceptions. I think there are exceptions, just like there are exceptions, in the church fathers or the saints in general. I think that usually most people, I would say, if you just converted to Orthodoxy, you should probably shut up for like a few years.
Yeah.
But at least a year, like at least a year. I know that sounds rough because it's like our world is so fast, but it
All
feels
right,
like
guys,
that should.
I'm gonna go ahead and hang up then. I'm coming up on my year.
Are you coming up on 1 year? When?
Yeah.
When did you get
Saint Nectarios Day, November 9th.
All right. Well, congratulations.
No, but I agree. As an artist, it was hard for me because I'm an artist by nature, photography, videography, design. So once I found Orthodoxy, I was like, ooh, I'm going to use all my talents and skills to, start an Instagram page and do this. And I went the wrong way for a very long time. And then I finally realized, like, just to let God work, and that the page doesn't belong to me. This doesn't belong to me. None of this. It doesn't matter what I think,
Yeah.
hashtag not your spiritual father.
Yeah.
So
there you go. But
yeah,
there is a joy, like especially if you are an artist. I've never seen I'd like to see your work. If you are an artist, there's like when you discover iconography and even the graphic language that you see in the church and the patterns and all this stuff, it's like can be so exciting. You just want to dive in. I know I did. I was carving icons before I was baptized. I was carving icons and just so excited. So I also understand the energy. It's not, I don't want to be like finger wagging and telling people what to do, but I just think that there's a lot of awkwardness definitely in the like really, really new convert space. Yeah. Like there was this guy that was like going after me on YouTube at some point, and you could tell like the guy, he was still a catechumen or whatever. And he even said at some point, he's like, my spiritual father told me I shouldn't be doing this. And then he keeps doing it. And I'm like, dude, you maybe take a pause. Like
that's when you say, catechumen depart.
Catechumen depart. Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the internet, and you guys have both talked about this a lot. The internet really does draw out the pathological, like the mental pathologies in people in a really bizarre fashion. I've definitely caught myself doing it. I've talked with Ian about when the rings of power first. Like I felt victim to it myself when the rings
you kind of got into that whole like discussion. Yeah.
I got in an argument with Father Andrew, and I was like 5 posts into it. I was like, what the heck am I doing?
What am I doing? That's hilarious. I just decided not to watch it, by the way.
I've been watching it so that way I can tell Nathan, and that way he can be angry and his day can be ruined.
I just don't care. Like,
yeah, it's definitely not. But you're right. The online space is not the greatest for that kind of stuff. So
I know we've probably digressed, but also this all fits into it. So Nathan, if you want to kind of go back.
Yeah, let's keep going with this evolution discussion if you want.
Okay, so I kind of want to talk about, I don't know how much you've looked at diseases or anything like that, but that's something I've studied a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean very, very little bit. But the more, especially in light of this conversation with Brett, and also just thinking about diseases in general, pathology doesn't make sense evolutionarily if the thesis that genes are conscious and evolution is conscious is true. And this is not so much true of bacterial infections and things like that, although you can make the argument, but viruses in particular don't make any sense at all because they're not alive even though they have genes, right? So I mean, there's a couple of different definitions for what a gene is. One of them is it's a mechanism for heredity, and viruses have that, right? But the only thing that viruses can do is kill their host. That's it. And once the host dies, the virus dies. I mean, to the extent that it was alive, which it really wasn't. But I mean,
yeah, I understand there's ambiguity about like viruses seem to be in an ambiguous space in regard to definitions of life. Yeah.
Right, but they become inert or impotent is maybe the best way to put it, when they kill their host. Like they can't, if the goal of the virus is to replicate itself, using kind of evolutionary language, when it kills the host, transmission is no longer possible, which is really, really strange to me. Like I've never heard a good evolutionary explanation for even why viruses would exist, because they don't add anything. You could, I suppose, make an argument that viruses were brought into existence by evolution to create competition in the cellular space or in the microbial space, because one of the things that viruses do, and this is a really interesting kind of side note, but with the increasing impotence of antibiotics, the idea of using viruses to kill bacterial infections is kind of moving up in the world, which is interesting, but also kind of terrifying, because if that goes sideways, it's going to go sideways real hard, real fast, and cause a lot of problems. But they're just a destructive mechanism. And like we said earlier, Weinstein's theories don't incorporate, they have no place for a virus. Like a bacterial infection has a place in that metaphysic, kind of, because like a staph infection, right? All of us have Staph aureus living on our skin, and that becomes a biological problem when it's taken out of its proper place in the hierarchy, right? When it's on your skin, it's fine, but if you step on a nail and it introduces some of that bacteria into deep muscle tissue, that's what causes the infection. It is the inversion of its place, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even really sure precisely what I'm even trying to ask, because I've been thinking about this for a while, but I don't know how to articulate it. Just the idea that diseases, from a materialistic standpoint, do not make sense. They serve no evolutionary purpose, and their generation doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, I don't. To be honest, like I really don't think that Brett Weinstein thinks. If you asked him, does evolution have a purpose? I don't think he would say yes. I think he would say no. It's just that what you're seeing is that because we can't avoid, because meaning is actually teleological. Like we said, like any statement, every phrase, every instance of meaning that we engage with implies teleology. What happens is people they get caught up by their own thing, where they say no, evolution doesn't have a purpose, but then two sentences later they're talking as if it did. So I think that's really the way to understand Weinstein. Now, in terms of the only purpose, I think that Brett would attribute to evolution would simply be that persistence of being, like that is the replication of a pattern, a self-replicating pattern that for some reason, that I don't think he even talks about the reason, but for some reason wants to replicate, like that has, there's a drive to replicate the pattern. So that seems to be the only thing that he might acknowledge. I don't even know, because I don't care that much about this stuff, to be honest. Like I'm not, I find like these questions, let's say, marginally interesting to the extent that I can use them as examples to explain something more important. Like that's the way that I deal with them. So in terms of viruses, it seems like the idea would be that if the virus, just in terms of evolutionary theory, if the virus replicates itself, that's enough. It just replicates itself, and then it mutates in order to replicate itself. And those that replicate themselves continue to replicate themselves. It's just like the idea that the more you can replicate, the more you can replicate. It's like this process. And then whether, if it kills the host, it doesn't matter, because it also is transmitted onto other hosts. So it migrates, because it migrates from host to host. It's the pattern, like it's just like, you could say something like, why is it that there's like 10 million mosquitoes and only 5 of them survive, right? It's something like that. So it's mass quantity and multiple hosts. And then through that, the pattern will still persist, because even if the host dies, it's been spread to other hosts. So it is something like a mosquitoes. That's the way that I would understand it. But I'm not in evolution. So people might say, like, Jonathan, you just don't understand evolution. And to be honest, I don't care that much, but I think that's what it is.
I'm definitely in the same boat there. I find because of the philosophical and ethical ramifications, but when it comes to precisely how things function or how things came to be, I don't particularly care. It's there's been
But
up my
from a theological point of view, like the notion of a parasite is very interesting. Like it's very interesting to understand
Like
the
sin,
problem. Sorry?
like sin.
Yeah, exactly. But to understand it even in terms of beings that like feed off of other beings, but then also understand that, what it is, what that is. And the interesting idea that viruses are, let's say, neither alive nor dead, that they're in a kind of ambiguous, monstrous state, kind of a chimeric state where they're neither one nor the other, is an interesting idea if you understand like what a parasite is. And also, the way that, so if you think about a sin or a passion as a possible parasitic process within you, you can kind of see that's what it is, because on the one hand, it's feeding off a good, right? So it's like, let's say lust, it's feeding off a desire that's good, right, which is necessary for the propagation of the species. Not only that, but is a very image of our union with God. But then what happens is that it's a parasite on that good, and then devours the host in that way. Like it actually ends up devouring you instead of elevating you towards higher goods, let's say.
That's why
So
I like the term feed your passions. That kind of, it's making sense to me in a way, like you're feeding the parasite, you're feeding your passions. It depends on what you give it.
Yeah, and you almost, it is very much like a parasite in the sense also, like, because then there also is like a weird inverse relationship that happens, which is that the parasite takes over, and then you actually end up serving the parasite. That's why the parasite also becomes an idol. The idea that our passions become idols. You can see that in the same way. Like let's say you have the god of something in an ancient sense. Like you have the god of desire, you have Aphrodite. It's like that's a parasite on a good, because desire is a pattern of being that God created. Right? It's a pattern of being that God created in the world, and can be turned towards God or connected to God. But then when it gets detached from it, it becomes an idol. And then it becomes this thing that asks it to serve, like you're feeding this God. And it's this weird parasitic relationship that you're having with these lower beings, let's say. So it's interesting to think about viruses in that way too, at a lower level, like inside you, how they're using the same types of mechanisms that create something like sinful behavior or idols and all these types of parasitic processes.
Like drinking beer isn't inherently bad,
Yeah,
but when you start over drinking, it's the same thing with your passions. When you start feeding it too much, then it becomes an idol, and then you become sick, and then you
that's
can
right.
die.
And then you throw up, and
Yeah.
then it manages you, because then what happens is you start to organize. Like you can think of an alcoholic, a great example. If the alcoholic starts to organize their behavior in submission to the passion.
First thing in the morning.
That's right. They start thinking like, oh, where can I get some alcohol? Like, oh, the fridge is almost empty, or like whatever, like, and so it's like they start to organize their life. And we all do that. I mean, we do that for all kinds of things. Like, I'm not saying it's like this exceptional behavior. But you can see it if you observe. You can notice how things become idols when we start to reorganize our other behaviors in relationship to that. And then if you're not careful, then you really do have a little God that's ruling you. And that, it's like if you don't serve the God and you don't feed the God, then you're going to suffer. Like it makes you suffer.
Now you have to drink to stay alive.
Right, exactly. And then the idea of the alcoholic that drinks just to be normal, or the drug addict that actually drinks just to be normal, it's like it's devouring you so much that it's no longer even giving you pleasure. It's actually just to not fall into the pit, you have to like serve this God.
Right. Well, it's interesting to think that in Protestant circles, and I'm not trying to pick on any Protestant listeners for either you or us, but the language of the church as a spiritual hospital that resolves these pathologies is almost completely absent. When I was a Protestant, I don't think I ever came across that analogy. And the proper ordering of that is not to order your life around your next drink or your next high, or your next one night stand. It's to orient your life around how it is that you serve Christ, that you may partake of the Eucharist and attend the divine services, which fits, as far as I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, fits that pattern properly, but correctly. It does not put something else in the place of the body and blood of Christ in the unity of the church.
No, that's totally right. Exactly. And so you could also add, the idea that the ultimate, let's say in terms of human relationships, like you can see that the ultimate purpose is to love one another and to give yourselves for others. And then when you disorder that, then you start to treat others like tools to get you stuff, right? Tools to get you what you want, whether it's money, whether it's pleasure, whatever it is. And so you can perceive it if you're careful. You can perceive it in yourself when that gets out of whack, which is all the time. Like it gets out of whack all the time, but at least if you know that it's like, okay, if it's not serving this higher good, which is love, if it's not serving this higher good, which is unity and with Christ, then ultimately it's a danger. It's in a dangerous space, and it can lead me really into dark places.
I have this thing that I've been struggling with when you just said, just to love others. And I've been struggling with, do I just love people or do I become rigorous in tradition of orthodoxy? Like trying to marry the two, like which one do I do? And not realizing that they can work together. Like you can be rigorous as an Orthodox Christian within tradition, and you can also love people.
Well, yeah. Well, the idea that loving someone is just being wishy-washy is just ridiculous.
It's like it's a cheesy statement. It's not.
Yeah, it's like saying that loving people just means you're just gonna let them do whatever they want. Like that's not really. I don't think that's the right way to go. But there is definitely, like you do see. I mean, at least I see in the ascetics and in the saints a tendency to be rigorous on yourself, and to tend to be careful in not being rigorous on others, to apply that rigor to yourself, especially if you're not in a position of authority. Like if you were a confessor, then that would be a different question. But if you're just a layperson in the church, then you should apply the rigor to yourself, apply compassion to others, and hope that that your own example will be a shining light for others to see because it's supposed to be fullness. Like, so if you're saying I'm a rigorous, but you're just angry all the time at everybody because they're not doing what they should, then it's like I'm not sure that's what Jesus wants for us. Like, I'm not sure that that's what I see described in the life of the great mystics, of the great saint, that have these tears of joy, these constant, this sense of compunction on themselves and infinite compassion for the world. So I think that's what I would say, is that I think it's fine to be rigorous, but at least start with, applying it to ourselves would be the way to do it.
Well, it's the distinction in the Brothers Karamazov between Elder Zosima and I believe it's Father Therapon. Like contrary, very traditionalist, very ascetic monastic that everyone thinks is a saint who really is not, versus Elder Zosima, who certainly is.
Yeah. But there is room. I'm not saying there's no room for a bit of like fire and brimstone. Like there are some saints that were tough as nails. Like I really wouldn't want to have met him. Like, to be honest, like think of Saint Cyril. My goodness, like I really would not have liked to. Like, it's like see Cyril. Like, forgive me for saying this, but it's like I probably would have like tiptoed around that guy. And there are several saints that were like that had a kind of firebrand. So I think there's a room for that for sure. But it's a dangerous road to walk on, because you would need to be always tougher on yourself than you are on others. Even someone like Saint Cyril, like you would imagine that he was as hard on himself as he was on others. That seems to be at least the rule that Christ set for us, which is that it's not that it's wrong to judge others, it's that you will be judged by the measure that you judge others, and so that's the thing you have to always you have to be able to deal with, let's say.
That does kind of tie interestingly into the importance of storytelling, which seems to be something that you talk about a lot these days, Jonathan. But the idea that if you're going to, leading by example works really well. And I don't know to what extent this is true of women, but for men especially, there's a reason why men tend to like things like the Iliad or Lord of the Rings or various war stories, because we see it's very easy in those scenarios to see who the good men are without them preaching it at you. You just see how they do the things, and then you follow them up the hill, or whatever the example would be. It's the compelling nature of the gospel, right? We follow Christ not because he gave us a good set of rules, but one, because he was the Son of God, and two, because he showed us how. And that's the most inspirational story ever told.
No, I don't. I mean, I think you're right. And that definitely makes it hard online for sure, because online it's all this, right? It's difficult. It's difficult to not. We have to be careful, let's say, not to fall into the pattern. That's why I tell people all the time. I just like, you need to go to church. Like, don't just watch me on YouTube. My goodness, like, do get involved. Like find a community, and then you'll be really on the real path. Like, you'll have all the problems and the confrontations, and you'll deal with jerks in the church, and you realize that you're a jerk in the church. Like, all these things are going to kind of manifest themselves, which is what we need to for our own sanctification. But
Yeah, it's a good time, isn't it?
yeah.
No, our priest, God bless him, we still do streaming just because some people can't make it in or whatever, but half the time he won't turn his mic on. And I know it's because he's Romanian and he doesn't want to do it. And I love it. So you just hear me horribly chanting and reading, and then I'm like, okay, so this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Oh man, the streaming stuff. Like I said, I remember when it started, because it lasted a long time here, the streaming, and also
like
church.
the last couple of months, right? That you guys got out of that last 6-8 months.
They opened the churches, I think, during the winter. I forget when, around February. I don't remember exactly when. That's when they reopened. Really, until then, it was really iffy. They even came to the Vax Pass for churches. Like they imposed for a few weeks. They imposed the Vax passport for churches, which was just. I really believe, like, to be honest, I believe that the churches that did that, I don't see them surviving. Like, I can't imagine they're going to survive having someone at the door with a phone scanning people and telling them whether or not they can enter the church.
Yeah, because they definitely didn't let beggars and homeless people and people with diseases into the church in the ancient times,
That's right. Exactly.
We were checking everybody for whatever diseases they had.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was definitely a rough time. But I remember at first, you put it on and you stand, and you do the prostrations. And I remember after a few months, I was just sitting there with a cup of coffee, and I'm like, you know what? Forget this. Like, forget this. This cannot happen. And so that's when we started doing the services at home, which was actually a wonderful moment, like a little oasis that we had during that time. But man, yeah.
See, this is when you just go full Joseph Smith and you just start your own church.
Well, just not do that.
Let's not do that. No, let's not do that.
I mean, yeah, in northern Arizona, we're really close to some of the more, shall we say, archaic-minded Mormons. So I mean, you hear people talk about, oh yeah, Mormons used to be polygamists, and we're all like, used to be.
Yeah, there's that one show, Sister Wives. He lives here where we live. If you've ever seen that, Jonathan.
I don't know what that is.
It's just a guy that has like 8 wives, and he lives in town, and I'll see him out at different places with a different wife. And I'm like, when do I get my second wife? I'm still trying to figure that out.
You're in the wrong camp there.
Okay.
If that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
We don't have the 70 virgins promised to us like some other groups, let's say.
Pivoting a little bit, with the whole online, the ethics of being a Christian online. How have you found ways to balance that with coming more into the spotlight? I mean, you're doing work with or I don't know if you're doing work with, but you're making some appearances on the Daily Wire. You're doing a lot of stuff with Jordan Peterson, and in many ways, kind of becoming one of the more well-known faces of Orthodoxy in the West. Like, how do you how do you balance that? I'd expect that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it's all a whirlwind. At least it's not like none of it has been planned. Let's say like all of this stuff just kind of happened.
It's evolution, Jonathan.
It's evolution is what it is. It's natural selection. But it is very it is. I have to say that it is very surprising everything that's going on and kind of like the situation that I find myself in. You know, I have a few priests that I told to, you know, to kind of knock me over the head if they feel like I'm getting out of hand. I do have a good relationship with my bishop, and he's expressed that, at least for now, he said that I should continue doing what I'm doing and that he's happy with what I'm doing. And so I try to pay attention, let's say, to the people that are in authority over me and that I respect, priests that I respect, and kind of watch and listen to what they have to say about what I'm doing. So that's been the way that I've been trying to be attentive to that. And so, but you're right, it's complicated. It's like it's a complicated situation to be in. But hopefully, I think the thing I'm worried about for sure is that it's always the pride problem. It's always thinking like this is me, like I'm the one doing this. That's definitely the thing that is always on the, because you act like you're doing things, right? It's like, you know, I have to, like, I'm redoing my website. Like I have to redo my website. I'm doing these things that are basically building what I'm doing. So it's like I'm putting energy and time and attention into building whatever it is, like your brand. Exactly, my brand. There you go. That exactly frames it. And so it's always like, oh man, like how much of this is just pride? How much of this is, and to be honest, like I don't know. I could just throw myself at the mercy of God, really, and hope that God will slap me around if I get too cocky. Like that's the only thing I can really say. But I also feel like I can't stop. Like I feel like, because I get messages from people. Like I get messages all the time, every day, every 2 days, and people and it's the thing that really touches me, or the thing that keeps me going, I would say, because when I was young, I was a Protestant, I was a Baptist, and I grew up in these churches where you would go and knock door to door and evangelize people. I remember hating every second of that, like just hating.
It's the world, isn't it?
It was just like knocking on the door and hoping
the people's doors you were knocking on hated it too. It's okay.
That's right, exactly. Like knocking on the door and hoping the person wasn't there at every single door that I was knocking on. And I just remember at some point when I was even before I became Orthodox, I kind of decided I am never going to evangelize again.
But I think you're knocking on a different door now.
Well, so that's the thing, is that I always thought I'm never going to evangelize, and especially because where I was converting Catholics. It's like, these people are Catholics, and I'm trying to tell them to become Baptist, basically, like tell them to believe in Jesus, because obviously they don't. And so it was all that, like, it just so rough on me. And so I always thought I'm never going to evangelize. And then I find myself in this weird position where I'm talking to atheists and secular people. And it's like, huh, interesting. And I don't feel like I'm trying to convince people. I just kind of want to show them just how beautiful this is. And so it's like, okay, well, as long as it's that, then I'm happy. Like I love it. And then when I get messages from atheists telling me that, you know, they used to think Christianity was stupid, they used to think this God thing was stupid, and now they're being baptized, they're a catechumen, it's like,
glory to God.
Like, glory to God.
Yeah.
You're right. That's exactly how I feel. And I feel like, okay, well, then I just have to keep stepping put one foot in front of the other every day, and that's pretty much all I can do right now.
Yeah, I think I started noticing things going really wrong when I became prideful. Not that they don't go wrong when you're not, because we're Orthodox. There's always things happening. But whenever I started making the page about me, I really saw a decline in my spiritual life. I started praying less. I was spending more time on my phone, acting as if I was Orthodox, but not actually being Orthodox, you know?
Yeah.
What's this? There's a Russian, I think it's a Russian hagiography that talks about a particular monk who didn't know how to, I think he didn't know how to read or what, but he was approached by what he thought was an angel. turned out it was actually a demon that basically convinced him to stop praying, stop reading the New Testament, and taught him all kinds of things about the Old Testament. But then his elders started noticing that, wait, he never prays. He's never at services. He's never even read the Old Testament. What the heck's going on here? And so they go talk to him, and they realize he's effectively demon possessed. And they perform an exorcism, and the monk eventually becomes a saint. But all that happened because he got a little prideful. It's like, oh, an angel appeared to me. Isn't that dope? That must mean I'm doing something really good. And that just led to all kinds of really fun things.
Yeah. Wow.
I think that's the same thing with Saint Silouan. Not the possession part, but he couldn't read or write, but people would come to him for spiritual advice because he was always praying and he was always at the services, even though he wasn't learned, And it just goes to show, like, knowing all the doctrines and the theology and all that, it's great, but if you're not actually living it, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Because I was talking to Deacon Philip. We did an episode on the old believers, which was a very interesting topic. And he was showing me the Listovka. And, we were talking about it. And I said, well, what's the point of it? And he's like, well, to pray. It doesn't matter if you're praying with a piece of rope or a piece of whatever, as long as you're praying and the prayer is coming from the heart. Have you looked at the old believers at all? Have you ever looked into any of that stuff? Like how they cross themselves, how their fingers are.
I know it's not the same. I know Patriarch Nikon changed the shape of the fingers, and that they have, what is it like? Is it like kind of like Christ's fingers, like the way the Christ does it?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's pretty interesting. I didn't know about that till I interviewed him. I was like, am I doing it wrong?
Yeah, we have to be careful. Like, there's definitely something that happened at that moment, which was strange, interesting, like maybe some kind of a little bit of influence from Protestantism in the Orthodox Church, but then maybe there were some excesses in terms of being attached to very small T traditions in the Russian Church as well. I'm not the kind of person that would just discount the old believers as being, just completely off track. Not at all. I do think that they probably have some things that we have lost, but they also I think they also probably do have some things which are that have become so very formulaic and are almost like rote and don't necessarily have kind of lost their flavor, maybe is the way to say it. So that's the way that I see it, but I don't know all the details of all the things that were changed when the patriarch changed things. I know for sure, like for me, like as an Orthodox icon carver, the old believers are important because they preserve the carved aesthetic when the icon carvings were banned in Russia during the synodal period. The carved icons were banned, and it was weird because they were banned by the Tsar because he said that they weren't well made, like that they didn't. He said if we had Bezalel and a Aholiab, we would not have to ban these icons, but because they're so horribly made, therefore we have to ban them. And what he meant by Peter the First, I won't say Peter the Great, but what he meant by horribly made is that it didn't look like Italian Baroque images, like they didn't look like Western European flowery Baroque type imagery, and so they basically burned all these images. Like they found some of these carvings like hidden in the rafters of churches, half burnt because someone had pulled it out of the fire to like hide it up in the rafters. And so while all this craziness was going on, the old believers with their brass icons preserved the whole aesthetic of relief icons in the Russian church. So I'm grateful to them for that, let's say.
Yeah, me and Nathan were talking about that yesterday, just about the change in art, and kind of like we were talking more specifically about how there's pictures of the Blessed Mother of God, the Theotokos, where she's like obscenely beautiful, like or like the women saints, where it's like it kind of takes away from what you should be doing when you're looking at them. It's like kind of weird,
Oh, you mean like that it's almost sensual, almost.
Yeah.
Like, her appearance. Yeah, for sure. In the Western art, Western art became so bad during the, it's funny because sometimes I feel like I don't agree with the Reformation, but I can sympathize with some of the reasons that brought about the Reformation. And so you had a time when I forget which artist represented his mistress as the mother of God. So it's a portrait of his mistress, but it's supposed to be her. It's like, okay, really? And that happened in Russia too, by the way. Much later though. And so you can see, it's like, you can understand why people would be like, what? No, like, I'm not going to go to church to have an image of someone's mistress, like up there, like on the altar. What the heck? What is this?
I'm not going to church to fall deeper into my lustfulness.
Exactly. But that's actually one of the only statements that the church has made about images, which seems to explain the style of iconography, was that the images should not incite desire, like that because it seems at the outset they were trying to adapt Roman art, and some of it was probably not really well done at the outset, and so they would bring in some of the eroticism of Roman art into the church, and I forget in which council it is. It's not in the Seventh Ecumenical Council, it's earlier, where in one of the councils they said that the images should not represent things that produce desire in us, let's say. So
right. There was, I want to say it was St. Andrews in Riverside this past July or June, whenever the heck it was. There was a lecture by Father Bogdan Bokor, and I think you interviewed him fairly recently.
Yeah, it was a great discussion I had with him.
Yeah.
That he was showing a couple of different slides of the progression of iconography from the Byzantine era through Romanesque art, and moving even further forward in the early modern art. And there's one in particular that was, I believe it was of the Annunciation, and the halo around the Virgin Mary's head looked like a film reel. And it was like, what the heck? Who painted that? Why was that allowed to be done?
Like a film reel? What do you mean?
Yeah. So like when you go into
because it was like 3D with
the four spokes and it obviously wasn't a cross. It looked like a film reel. What the heck?
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Well, the story of the halo is hilarious. It's hilarious when you notice what in Western art it becomes funny, because it's a glory. Basically, it's what it is. It's like the glory of the person, and it's comes from Roman art. It's not a Christian invention. It's basically that which the person radiates, or the glory in which it participates. You could say that's what the halo was. And then it became something like, let's say, the glory of God in that person, something like that, right? As the Christian art developed. But then when you start to have 3D art, it's like, how do you deal with this thing? And so then they start making it into like a plate that floats over the head. And then you look in Giotto, for example, there's some images where Giotto shows someone from behind. And then it's like, all you see is the halo, as if it was you just see a halo. It's like as if there was like a floating hat. So now how do you represent this floating hat from behind, right? You just represent this disc. And so it's just so awkward. Like you can just see it. You can really see how it's so funny. Just for the halo, you can argue that Renaissance and Baroque art are a degenerate version of medieval art. Like it's a degeneration of medieval art, because obviously they stopped to know what this was about. Like they forgot what this was. And then at some point it just becomes this object. It's kind of floating above. And then finally they just dispense with it, because it's really awkward to have this thing in the painting, this big disc, like plate that floats above the head.
Since we're on the topic of modern garbage representations of good and holy things, did you have the misfortune of watching the Gawain and the Green Knight film?
Oh yeah. I did a video on it too. Yeah.
You did as well?
Yeah.
In particular, I'm curious what your thoughts are with the horrifying representation of Saint Winifred in that.
I mean, it's the whole thing. The whole thing was just. It's just the same story that's been being told in every single movie right now. It's basically the idea of it's just the replacement of the masculine with the feminine. That's what the whole story is about.
Yeah. Smash the patriarchy.
That's right. So you can see it. The story is framed there's a scene before the movie and there's a post-credit scene. Right. And the scene before the movie is Gawain sitting there. And then the crown comes down from heaven, right? and like lands on his head, and then his head bursts on fire, right? I think that's how it starts. Then he like bursts on fire. It's like, okay, interesting. And then at the end of the movie, there's a scene where you see his crown on the ground, like the Gawain's crown on the ground, and a young girl, I imagine his daughter, who knows, like a little girl takes it and puts the crown on her own head, and that's how it ends. And
Wasn't
it's like,
that the daughter of him and Saint Winifred?
well, it does. No, not it doesn't say. It's like it just doesn't say who it was.
Yeah.
It's just like that it's the daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
So then you can understand that the whole movie's about that. And so the story with Saint Winifred is just about her finding her head. It's like giving the man giving the woman's head back to her so that she can be the head. Like, I don't know what to say. That's what the whole story is about.
That's that. I don't often get very angry about bad representation in film, especially medieval stories, because I don't expect anyone to understand what the medieval stories are about. But that one, I was like, okay, this director did enough research to actually know this hagiography, and he purposely twisted it entirely out of shape.
Yeah, made it political and made it.
I loved that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm a videographer. I mean, I thought the cinematics were amazing. I
The
understand.
visuals were
I
very
understand the blasphemy. I don't like that at all. But I watched it like 4 times because of just the cinematics. Nathan hates that. I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a beautifully filmed movie.
Nice. Is well made. So we need better. Like, this is the thing. We just need better stories. And so the problem that we've seen in the past few decades, or even the past 100 years, is that because many Christians in the West, they've been taken up so much by materialism, they've just become basically positivists or materialists. You know, they inhabit a scientific world. They've lost the symbolic edge. Like, they've lost the trope. They don't understand story patterns. They don't know how to tell stories. And so it's like the best. Anyways, so then what happens is that the story space got captured, and really well, by very subversive types who actually do understand story tropes, do understand the symbolism, and is weaponizing the symbolism to kind of destroy normal order. But the thing is that they're the ones who get closest to the actual patterns of storytelling, and that's why they win. Like, that's why it's so, even though it's twisted, they do end up being more compelling than what many, let's say, of the Christians have been able to do in terms of storytelling. So there are exceptions, and for sure Lord of the Rings is the shining exception, like the very bright shining exception, but they're very few and far between. Like, there's not a lot. So
yeah, when I say that movie was beautiful, I'm now thinking that it actually wasn't. You know, it was beautiful in one way, but it was absolutely disgusting in another. And I think that's the problem, is they can spend billions of dollars on it and tell a story that's close to the truth, but they're never gonna get there fully with that.
yeah, and there are a few people that are there are a few people that succeed. And so even in the Hollywood, like, if you look at, for all his faults, like, he has faults, but let's say Mel Gibson's movies, they've been pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, Hacksaw Ridge was bloody, but it was impressive. Like, that was an impressive story. You know, it really elevates. You know, same with Apocalypto. I mean, that was just an amazing masterpiece. So there are possibilities, and so I don't know if you saw what's the name of the movie? The Hidden Life. Have you seen A Hidden Life?
No.
I've heard of it, but I don't believe I've watched it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, there's a beautiful example. It's basically the story of a Christian who refuses. He's just a Christian who refuses to swear allegiance to Hitler.
Yeah, he's the one up in he's in like Italy or Austria.
He's in Germany, or in Austria, I think. He's in Austria. And then it's just like his hidden journey through that process as he becomes more and more blamed, let's say, and it's a very beautiful movie to show this kind of secret hidden life of a Christian. So there are possibilities.
There's also, I was listening to something the other day where they were talking about the fact that a lot of movies that actually show what it's like to be a Christian aren't Christian movies. Like, they're spiritual movies, and they actually make you see the passions that this person is struggling with. And if you're Orthodox, you can watch a movie that isn't Orthodox at all, and you can really start to see, like, these are the passions. This whole movie is just the passions.
Yeah, there's a great movie based on, I think it's based on a novella by Tolstoy. It's called, oh, I know it in French. It's called Un soleil même la nuit. A sun, like the sun even at night or something. Sorry, I don't know the title in English, but it's like the story of a person who wants to become an ascetic, and then lives in a cabin, and then you can see his struggle to deal with his own passions. And the story is really powerful because there's a scene where there's this woman, this like rich aristocrat who's just bored, and so wants to go seduce this hermit. So she goes into the house, and then she comes in during the rain or something, and so she like undresses. There's some situation where she tries to seduce the monk, and then at some point she turns around and she looks at him, and he like cut his finger off, and he's just standing there with his hand, and it's like this blood pouring, and she just freaks out, right? She like screams and like runs out of the house, and then she meets up with her friends, and then she says she wants to walk barefoot behind the procession, like basically in compunction for what she did, right? And so it's like this really extreme story. But then like a few weeks later, whatever, this young mentally handicapped woman comes to this guy's house, and then she needs help, and so he helps her, but then he ends up sleeping with her. And it's just this really powerful, like just like to show like how how our passions work, and how like anyway, it's a really
Wow.
it's really great movie. It's definitely worth. I saw it a long time ago though, but it's really well done.
Well, Nate, I'm not
That's
not sure how much longer Jonathan
Yeah,
has.
we should
but
probably go.
yeah, do you want to, Nate? Do you have any final things that you want to do, or do you want to see if we can do a part 2 sometime?
it's been great talking to you, Jonathan. I've enjoyed it one way or the other. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
thanks for reaching out. It was wonderful to meet both of you.
I appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it again soon, and we'll have a little bit more of something lined up to talk about. We kind of went back and forth, but I think it was great. I think it'd be good for the viewers. We'll put your links in the description. If you guys want to support Jonathan, you'll see it there. Make sure to share this video, become a Patreon member to the Orthodox Logos and Death to the World if you feel called to do so. God bless you guys. Thank you again, Jonathan. Nathan, I will see you probably later tonight.